because I'll only be here for a short while. Nothing is more magical. As long as they roam the earth, evil can never harm the pure of heart.
I am the Lord of Darkness. I require the solace of the shadows and the dark of the night. Sunshine is my destroyer. All this shall change. Tonight, the sun sets forever. There shall never be another dawn.
In December of 1985, director Ridley Scott's Legend arrived in UK theatres. Audiences in the United States had to wait till April 1986 to see the film. Produced on a large budget of around $30 million, the movie failed to make any large impact at the box office and was a commercial failure. Critics at the time criticised the film for being too heavy on visuals and light on story. Despite its poor box office results and a slamming by the critics, especially in the USA, it has become a cult classic and is fondly remembered for Tim Curry's incredible performance as Darkness and Ridley Scott's amazing direction with the help of the talented DP, Alex Thompson. Legend was Ridley's fourth movie, and he was looking to move forward with another project after Blade Runner. He had two ideas, one was a musical and the other was a fairy tale. He was introduced to author William Hotzberg. Ridley had suggested his idea of a fairy tale story, and William at that point had already been writing loads of short fictional stories just for fun. Ridley wanted a fairy tale adventure which had unicorns in it, and for there to be a villain called Darkness, and that was it, and William and Ridley bounced back ideas on developing the script. The script process changed a lot from what we finally ended up with. It contained a lot of high romance and fantasy in its first approved screenplay, but many felt it would be far too costly to make in its original conception. So the story had to be scaled down, but key elements in the story were retained in the final draft. Ridley had wanted to shoot in a large forest and visited a location he felt was suitable, but it became difficult to get enough light through the trees, even during the day. So they decided to shoot at the 007 stage at Pinewood Studios, where they would be able to control the lighting to achieve his vision. A large majority of the trees were built with plaster and styrofoam, and the set was extended with mirrors. The production designer Ashton Gorton did an incredible job creating the world of Legend inside a studio. The set was also full of real trees as well, and hundreds of birds were also living on the set. The amount of noise on the set made it so difficult to record the dialogue. Everything had to be dubbed in the movie, and unfortunately you can easily tell in many scenes, which isn't off-putting, but does affect some of the emotional scenes, or particularly when Lily is crying, it comes across as wooden. When they came to the end of shooting at Pinewood in late June of 1984, the set caught fire and the 007 stage burnt down. Apparently loads of gas had built up near the roof. The security guard on duty noticed all the birds flying out of the soundstage and looked up and heard two pops and witnessed a soft explosion that travelled across the whole roof. It was too late and they couldn't save the famous 007 stage. Thankfully it was rebuilt and reopened in January 1985, just in time for filming to commence on Roger Moore's last Bond film, A View to a Kill. The cast of the film is very small. It mainly focuses around Jack, Lily and Darkness. Tom Cruise plays Jack, who got his big break with Risky Business. I think Top Gun really made him a superstar. In Legend he doesn't really provide a memorable performance. I think he's just as wooden as the trees. Lily is played by Mia Sara. This was her first movie role and surprisingly does a very good job. She had to do a lot of scenes with Tim Curry, who can out-act anyone, but she manages to hold it together and show plenty of emotion and does a good job with the songs that accompany the Jerry Goldsmith score. Ridley Scott was very impressed with Tim Curry's performance in Rocky Horror Picture Show and felt he would be ideal for the character of Darkness. Tim was a little unsure about taking it on, but reluctantly agreed. He didn't realise how much time it would take to apply the makeup, but once he saw himself in the mirror, he was very impressed. For the film's story, I'm going to be focusing on the UK theatrical cut, because this version is probably the one most people are familiar with, as it was more widely distributed, but the strange thing is the US cut was shown on UK TV a lot. But I'll go into the differences later on in regards to the US and director's cut. The movie opens in a forest where the goblin Blix is seen travelling to a castle where the Lord of Darkness laments his isolation. He senses the presence of 2 unicorns who safeguard the power of light, and calls forth one of his goblin servants to find and destroy them. He wants Blix to bring him the unicorn's horns so he can create an eternal night of darkness, roam the lands freely, and of course, rule the universe. Blix asks him where he can find the unicorns. Darkness says, innocence. Meanwhile, Princess Lily is travelling through the forest by herself and heads to a cabin to meet her friend Nell. She is unaware Blix and his companions are following her. After a quick conversation with Nell, where it's revealed she prefers the simple life and not the life of a privileged princess, she heads out to find her friend Jack. He jumps down out of nowhere and surprises her. Jack has been teaching Lily how to speak to the animals of the forest. Jack reveals he has something special to show her. He blindfolds her and takes her to the secret location, but Jack is not aware Blix is watching them. He takes her to visit the unicorns. Lily wants to touch them, but Jack forbids it. But she doesn't listen and slowly attempts to approach them. She begins to sing to one of the unicorns to get its attention. It slowly walks towards her, but just before she touches it, Blix fires a poisoned blowpipe dart, hitting the stallion. The unicorns bolt, and Blix charges after them. Jack tells her it was forbidden to touch them, and she risks her immortal soul. Lily makes light of Jack's fears and sets him a challenge by throwing her ring into a pond, declaring she will marry whoever finds it. As soon as Jack dives in, the world begins to change rapidly, and the surface freezes over, causing the world to turn to ice. Blix finds the wounded unicorn and cuts off its horn. Jack breaks through the ice, but Lily has gone. She returns to Nell's house to hide from the rampaging goblins. But when she hears them crowing that her beauty led them to find the unicorns, she swears she will make it right and goes after them. Jack wanders the forest, struggling to find Lily, but meets the elf Honeythorn Gump, a fairy and a pack of dwarfs. Gump is furious Jack took Lily to see the unicorns. They believe Lily is to blame for the world turning to ice. Jack pleads he meant no wrong, but the damage is done. They agree to search together for her in an attempt to bring balance to the world. They find the fallen stallion, and Jack pleads his innocence and apologises to the remaining unicorn. One of the dwarfs stays behind to look after the unicorn. Jack is then led through a secret passage by the fairy to find armour and a sword, so he can go on his quest to save Lily and retrieve the unicorn's horn. There are 3 cuts available of Legend. There is a 4th, but it was only used to preview the film for its initial screen test, and when it came to scoring the movie. It runs at 140 minutes. The director's cut is about 115 minutes, the UK cut is 94 minutes, and the US cut runs at the shortest at 89 minutes. The results and the changes are mainly from Ridley Scott panicking to audiences' reaction to screen tests. For its first showing, he got a few people sniggering throughout the film, and he said he could smell pot. I think like many of us, we have watched Ridley's films a bit high, especially Blade Runner, and a movie like Legend which has such amazing visuals. It's only natural for stoners to be attracted to it. Ridley felt the movie was too long and hacked it down, and felt the score and tone of the film was a little too sweet for American audiences. He made minor changes to the movie's structure and added a prologue at the beginning to help some of the slow people to understand the film's plot, which is already extremely simple. I think down to the removal of some scenes it made the story a little unclear, thus why a prologue was added. He removed Jerry's score and got Tangerine Dream to provide a more contemporary soundtrack. At the time, with other fantasy movies, such as The Neverending Story, it seemed like the ideal way to go to appeal to a younger audience. The UK cut is closer to the director's cut that was unearthed in 2000 and put on DVD in 2002. All the cuts outside the US had Jerry Goldsmith's score attached. Now I'm going to show you the difference between the US and UK cuts. I'm not going to go into great detail, but just discuss the scenes that are most obvious to the viewer. Early in the American version, we see someone being tortured by demons, giving the film a far darker introduction. Darkness is shown in blue with glowing fingernails and eyes, but also gives a slightly different speech. In the European version we do not get the torture scene, and Darkness is hidden from view, making his appearance later on in the film that much more of a surprise. Lily is a princess in the European version, but called merely a lady in the American cut. In the American version, Lily has a vision of the future where she sees the revolving figures of the clock becoming encased in ice for a moment. This shot is not included in the European cut. Lily asks Jack to teach her the language of the rabbits in the European version, whereas she asks him to tell me our future in the American cut. When Gump queries Jack in the American version, Jack immediately admits that he took Lily to see the unicorns. In the European version, Jack first denies that he did anything, and then admits what he did. Gump becomes furious and threatening in the European version and makes Jack solve a riddle before all will be forgiven. The American version does not contain the riddle and is much shorter. The scene with Meg is extremely short in the American cut, where it's a far longer sequence in the European version. Jack uses his flattery and wit to distract her before killing her. After Lily enters Darkness's hall, the American version cuts to a scene not in the European cut of an attack on Gump and Jack by what the script refers to as pygmies. The dancing sequence is much shorter in the American cut. There are some added lines in the American version just before Darkness falls into the abyss. The scene of Jack diving into the pond for Lily's ring is intercut with a unicorn's horn being restored, and his subsequent revival in the American version. These shots are missing in the European cut. One last shot of Darkness laughing can be seen in the American version. The American cut does not contain any of the songs sung by Lily in the European version, or the Goldsmith score. The director's cut of Legend is an entirely new and different viewing experience for American audiences. Additional footage and dialogue is included, and the film gives the story much more time to breathe, but unfortunately this does make the film a tad too long. The director's cut does not begin with a prologue. Lily is presented as a princess and her relationship with Jack is not entirely clear. She gives him a kiss and Jack is afraid to return it in fear of having Lily break his heart. Unlike the American cut, Lily sings several songs during the film, one of which she uses to first attract and then calm a charging unicorn. A different song and extended sequence gives Jack the clue he needs to answer Gump's riddle. In a slightly extended version in comparison to the UK cut, when he encounters Meg Mucklebones, in the American cut he has no problem killing her with his sword. In the director's cut he has to use his wits to distract her by using his shield as a mirror, while he fumbles with his sword. When he finally kills her he says, "I did it," which makes more sense as he almost didn't survive. The biggest difference between the US and UK cut to the director's cut is the replacement of the happy ending, with an ending that doesn't tie up all the loose ends. The new bittersweet ending has Jack always promising to be there for Lily, while she asks him if it will be alright for her to visit him again tomorrow. Jack runs off into the sunset by himself, where in the other cuts, Lily and Jack are together. Rob Bottin, who has now retired from the industry, had made a name for himself providing the amazing and grotesque makeup on John Carpenter's The Thing. He had the difficult task of visualising and creating Darkness and the other monsters within the world of Legend. Ridley wanted the character of the devil to be sexy but also be half goat. Rob Bottin felt there hadn't been a definitive version of the devil on camera, and he clearly succeeded with his creation. This could possibly be Bottin's best work. The level of detail and the huge transformation of Tim Curry is an incredible achievement. The character Blix was modelled on Keith Richards, and you can tell from the structure of his face. Blix was played by female actress Alice Playton, who also provided the voice of Gump. The scary Meg Mucklebones, played by Robert Picardo, who frequently worked with director Joe Dante and was a regular on Star Trek Voyager, pulls in a performance just as good as Tim Curry. With that heavy latex costume covered in water, it made his outfit incredibly heavy to wear, and he had to dive out of the lake to surprise Jack. With that heavy latex, it doesn't even make a dent on his performance. I'm sure this character gave kids the chills just as much as Darkness. Jerry Goldsmith had spent nearly 6 months writing his soundtrack to Legend. It is at its core a classic fairy tale score. It's full of romance and mystery, but makes great use of seductive musical techniques for Darkness. At the time it was highly praised by European critics, and many consider it to be Jerry's best score. For me personally, if you have a score by Goldsmith, you should never replace it. It's like replacing a score by John Williams with Giorgio Moroder. It's sinful and should never happen. The score is easily available, but I don't think it's complete, but there is an isolated soundtrack on the DVD which may include more music. Tangerine Dream provided the score to the US cut, which they produced in 3 weeks, which is very impressive for the short schedule. In an attempt to appeal to the general public, they went with a synthesized score. It's a lot darker in many areas and does change the tone of the movie. Some may say for the better and some for the worse. I'm a big fan of electronic scores, but personally I think it was a mistake to replace Jerry Goldsmith's work. I think maybe at the time it felt suitable and sounded very contemporary, but listening to it now it does sound far more dated, and Jerry's work is timeless with it being produced with a full-blown orchestra. Universal, who distributed the film in the States, also wanted to include pop songs. There are 2 in the film, one by John Anderson from the band Yes, and the other by Brian Ferry, which was included in the end credits. Brian Ferry's song was also turned into a music video. I think the biggest fault with this movie is with its story. It is wafer thin, and many of my friends who revisit it later on find it a bit of a hollow experience, and it struggles to hold their attention. It is so fondly remembered in a nostalgic way for Tim Curry's performance, and certainly the makeup which frightened many children, including me growing up. I was terrified of him. Its visuals certainly are incredible, and without doubt it's the best looking film I've personally ever seen. Nothing really has come close to it in terms of its immense detail, and just on a technical level, it just blows my mind how rich and beautiful the set design is. For a film created and shot within a studio, it boggles the mind how they achieved the creation of this world, with many films today just shot in a digital domain, with green screen serving as the background. It makes Legend that much more special. The world Jack and Lily live in feels very small despite the huge landscapes they've created. You're not shown outside the forest, and apart from the key characters, the movie has a small cast. You're not shown the palace Lily comes from, and not much backstory is given, so it feels like you're watching part 2 of a 3-part story act. It feels like you're missing the beginning. Tom Cruise is pretty wooden, as I mentioned earlier, and doesn't really make an impact. He is probably the weakest aspect of the film. Apparently his character had far more dialogue in the original screenplay, but Tom felt his character should be simpler, and with the help of the writer they reduced his dialogue and simplified his character. I'm not sure if that was a good thing, because that leads to him having barely any screen presence. Instead we just have him posing a lot with his floppy hair. What I always think Tom Cruise is good at is showing his emotions. He's always pretty good at losing his temper on camera or being upset. When Lily is knocked over by darkness, you see Tom scream out in anger. It comes across as very real. It's great to see a film with a classic fairy tale narrative. It doesn't try to be modern with its structure. There's no outlandish action sequence or has the imagery lacking colour, and the idea of it being a gritty retelling of an existing story. It stays true to what you think a classic fairy tale would be like and should be like. It does borrow a style and structure from the Grimm's fairy tales, but also includes many similar traits from other popular stories such as Peter Pan and Snow White. It also has a strong religious theme. You could see Jack and Lily being Adam and Eve, with Lily making the mistake of touching the unicorn. She's essentially sent to hell. So there is many different themes you can see within its story and visuals. And of all the cuts available, I would probably watch the UK theatrical version. It has a Goldsmith score and doesn't suffer from pacing issues. I don't think there is a perfect version available, even with having the option of the director's cut. I still think some changes need to be made to make the ultimate version. It would be good to see a combination of all 3, but obviously the running time should be kept to under 2 hours, maybe to around an hour and 45 minutes. I did rewatch the US cut for this review, and I hadn't seen it for a long time. Ever since the special edition DVD came out, I've pretty much just stuck with the director's cut, but with the Blu-ray recently I found more enjoyment with the UK version. I find the US version to be poorly edited and important scenes have been severely cut down. It certainly is a darker film and that works heavily in its favour, but showing darkness at the beginning does kind of ruin the surprise of his reveal later on. I like the idea of the happy ending in the US cut with Lily and Jack running off together and the shot of darkness. I like the idea that he's not entirely defeated, because you need light and dark to maintain a balance in that universe. I highly recommend Legend, but you have to bear in mind its story isn't that involving or original, and you have to be in the right frame of mind to enjoy it. If visuals and music aren't the key elements to encourage you to watch a film, and you are someone looking for an in-depth story, then you will be disappointed to some degree. For me, I can usually put aside the shortcomings of a story if the visuals and music are strong enough, and they certainly are in Legend. But what makes this film so special is Tim Curry's iconic performance as Darkness.
Father, I hold the world in my grasp, and yet this girl distracts me. It has been an eternity since I felt such desire. What am I to do?
She fascinates you because her soul is pure.
I'll take her then.
Fool! You must woo her.
I've found my true mate. And you know it.
Never.
Beneath the skin, we are already one. Was it not your sin trapped the unicorn? Even now, the evil seed of what you've done germinates within you.
No. You lie. You disgust me.
Lily! Jack, there's nothing you can do now to help her. Be thankful she still lives. You've got to help us, Jack.
The last unicorn dies tonight. Hear me, ye powers of the night! We offer this sacrifice in honor of you!